this is how to turn a shot like this into a shot like this. So this is a very similar setup to my last video, and I'm just gonna be breaking down how I did it. And this is very similar to how you would set up and light an interview. So we're gonna go through basically just a cinematography breakdown of this shot and this shot, I guess, because 2-camera setup. So we're gonna really quickly go through the camera setup, and then we're gonna go over the most important part, the lighting. But they are very closely linked. So my A camera right here is the Sony FX30, and I currently have the Sigma 24-70 f2.8 at 2.8 and about 35mm. So APS-C sensor 35mm is gonna be just over 50mm equivalent for full frame. And my B camera is the Sony a7 IV with the 7200 G Master Mark II at basically 70. It's at like 71 right now, but I think that was mostly an accident. And I do actually have an ND filter on the FX30, and that is because of these lights right here. So I'll talk about that in a second when I get into the lighting. Audio is being done in 2 ways. I have a shotgun mic right here and a lav mic on, as you can see here. The lav is plugged into the Rode Wireless Pro on my hip, which is then plugged into the a7 IV. And then the shotgun mic is the Rode NTG1, which is plugged in via XLR to the top handle of the Sony FX30. All right, now that's all out of the way. That's like the more fun stuff. Then we're gonna get into the actual like important stuff when it comes to lighting. So I have a very limited lighting setup, I guess. I don't have many lights, and I don't have very powerful lights. So I wanna get more lights and more powerful lights, but at the moment, we're stuck with what we've got, so we're working with what we can. This is the Amaran 100D with the Aperture Light Dome Mini 2. So I have a small softbox. It's not very big softbox. Softboxes can be way bigger. Bigger the light, the more diffused it's gonna be, and just the softer the light in general. I do have both layers of diffusion and the grid on the softbox, because that'll create more directionality and it'll prevent the spill from going onto the background, because I don't want to light the background too much. I want the practicals back there to do most of the lighting. And I do just have this on a light stand just out of frame. It's right here. I'm actually touching it right now, so it's like right there. And it's basically being motivated by this big window or door that I have here that you can't see, but it sort of makes sense given the room. You can't see any windows back there, so you could assume maybe there's a window in front of me. So it's almost reasonable to think that I'm being lit by a window. Maybe not, who knows? Maybe if the room was brighter, it would make a bit more sense. And because this is only a 100-watt light, I do have it at 100%. And the problem with it only being a 100-watt light is it's just not bright enough to have the effect that I want it to have. So now these practicals in the background, that's just like the range hood of my stove. And it's a nice little background light there. Like you can see the light in the background, and it is sort of lighting a little bit of stuff back there, not a heap. But as you can see, it almost looks as if it's lighting me, even though there's absolutely no way it can. But because it's in the shot, it makes sense to have a little bit of spill from that light, which isn't actually that light. It's actually the Aperture MT Pro set to about the same color temperature up above me on my C-stand. As you can see, my hand is like really lit up there. So motivating lights like that practical back there with a secondary light, in this case, it's acting as a rim light, can sort of create the illusion that I'm not lighting the scene is just as it is, this is the natural lighting in this room, when it definitely is not. But if you can see a light there and you can see the light on the side of my head, your brain's sort of just like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that's the light that's hitting my head there. Doing stuff like that can make things feel less lit, per se. And the benefit of using either bicolor or full color lights is you can adjust the color temperature of it, so it's more similar to that. And normally I would just have it on full white, but because I'm using it as a motivating light for the practical, I want to make it match the practical. So I've warmed it up to about 3000 Kelvin as opposed to 5600, which is what the 100D is. So I actually have a curtain right here, so it actually does act a little bit as a negative fill for the lighting, so it's creating a bit more contrast. If I sort of move it out of the way, it can get a little bit of bounce off the wall, not a lot, but it just sort of adds a bit of negative fill on the side of my face, and hopefully helping a little bit with the audio, because this is a big, not empty, but kind of almost empty room. So the reverb is less than ideal. So this is a pretty good setup for a YouTube A-roll shot like I am now. We have A cam, B cam. It's lit nice. We're shooting on the shadow side, which is always what you want to do generally. If you wanted to make it more like cinematic, you would probably backlight more, so move the light even further back around, obviously so you can't see it, but you don't have stuff front lighting a lot of their time in films. But what we would do in an interview case is the interviewer would sit between the camera and the light, so right about here. And if I'm talking to the interviewer, this is what you would see. So both the cameras are on the shadow side. That would be what you would see in some sort of documentary case. And we're just pretending that there's a documentary and someone's asking me questions right now. So I think the biggest problem with this setup in particular is just that it's not bright enough, because I do have 3 stops of ND on the FX30 and I only have a 100 watt light. Ideally, I would probably have like a 200 or 300 watt light set at not 100%, but this should work reasonably well. It's just S-Log3 does prefer to be overexposed, and it's actually like exposed exactly correctly right now, which is not correct. Kind of like how I didn't film an outro for this video. So here's that. That's how I set up an interview or an A-roll shot for YouTube. Let me know what you think about that, and go watch that video about camera technology in recent years, or less than years, recent time. Do all the other things. I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.